français?
Oder sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Yes, if the thought of answering these questions brings you out in a cold sweat, fear not. It may no longer be a bar to passing your French or German GCSE.
The government's moving to abandon old-style oral exams for 16-year-olds because apparently they're too stressful. Instead, teachers will do continuous assessment in small groups. Well, with us now, Simon Waugh, who's a French teacher, and educational psychologist Vivienne Hill. Good morning, both.
Good morning.
Your reaction then, Simon, good or bad?
Well, as Victor Meldrew would have said, I don't believe it. If I could latch onto one thing, how language teaching or examining has improved since I took it in the 1970s, and that has been the oral content. When I passed French O-level in 1970 on, in those days, it was all about grammar, dictation. You probably remember dictate, or sort of Kate's too young, of course. Well, you probably too young as well. Yes.
No,
you do remember dictate. Okay, I don't want to offend anyone. But we had a dictation. A lot of prose translation, that's to say, from our own language into French. Terribly difficult, terribly academic. But with the GCSE, they brought in this 20... We did have an oral exam, but it really was that the French teacher said, well, turn up at... can you make it sort of 10 to 10? Yeah, we'll do it then. And it was about 5 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we knew you in the past, didn't we, dear? And that would be the end of it. But now it's 25%, and just the whole makeup, the fact is they were drilled in situations, going into shops, buying things, going into cafes, ordering coffees. You know, if your car had broken down abroad, you knew how to say, look, you know, I've got a flat tyre. Okay. The things that you'd need when you go abroad. And I thought, this is really, really good, really refreshing. And I liked the way they were drilled and they had the quarter of an hour. Went on for a quarter of an hour, which I am now, of course,
yes,
which I always do. But anyway, but I think it was great. And the one part of the exam I've really, really treasured as a GCSE teacher has now gone. And as I've started, okay, I don't believe it.
Right. Vivienne.
Yes.
Oral exams said to be stressful for children. Well, stress is part of life, isn't it? And
absolutely.
Shouldn't kids be able to deal with that?
I think that it's more than just coming down to stress. I think that Lord Deering's report actually yielded information that proved that this result of these particular assessments wasn't actually measuring the ability of the child at all. In 10 minutes, they barely got over the stress and anxiety of the situation.
Well, previous generations have managed to get over the stress, so why can't this one, or have we always been stressed out over
I think examinations are stressful for all sorts of people and always have been.
Good.
But I think that there's recognition that there's more stress for children in our society. We're more tested now than children were 20, 30 years ago. Much more so. And I think it's about making sure that we have an accurate measure of their ability. Should 2 years of intensive study really come down to performance in a 10-minute very stressful scenario?
Let's put that point back to Simon then.
Well, I think if you leave it to the teacher, you are going to get inaccuracies. This is a good way of measuring how much they have learned, how hard they've studied, and how much they've learned. There's no better way than the setup as it stands at the moment. And I actually think short-term stress is good for people. I think it's propelling. I think long-term stress, that's what's debilitating, long illnesses, etc. But I think short-term stress, we need to be preparing our children for short-term stresses, which you two are under. I've just watched you preparing for this programme. You're under short-term stress. I think it's marvellous, and you're doing a great job.
Good.
But it's all. This is what life is. This is what being successful is.
Maybe what we haven't really identified is that perhaps children aren't being adequately prepared and orientated.
Well,
that's nothing to do with changing the exam. Sack the teacher. Right. Get some decent teachers in. But don't change the exam.
To put it slightly more diplomatically,
yes,
surely if children feel more confident, if they have been better rehearsed, if you like,
absolutely,
and taught better and practiced
yes,
more, they'll feel on top of the subject, and then they wouldn't feel stressed. You feel stressed
absolutely,
if you're not sure you're going to make it.
And my understanding is it isn't an intention to completely eradicate an oral assessment. It's to try and make an oral assessment that actually measures the ability.
But if that assessment is carried out by the teacher, is it really going to be accurate? Was one of the points that Simon was making.
The balance of teaching, maybe, is an issue. I spoke to somebody this morning and she said her 14-year-old's really bright, she speaks the language, but the balance of teaching doesn't allow her to become confident orally. Yes. And that's where she sees the problem being. And the government, just to put this to you, Simon, they say it's not the end of oral per se. This is not dumbing down. There'll be more oral tests, but they will be part of the continuous assessment, which is a better reflection of a pupil's language ability rather than their ability to cope under stress?
No, I think that the test as it stands is a good reflection of someone, how much work they've done, whether or not they prepared themselves, and I think it's incumbent on the teacher. I understand it's difficult in whole class situations to prepare children for the French, German, Spanish, Italian, whatever language they're doing, the test as it stands. It does need you to bring children out after school, bring them back, give them one-to-one. I understand that, and that sometimes, in a school day, the way things are set up, it's not always possible.
Okay.
But I do not think we should abandon it. This
abandonment.
We are abandoning it simply.
we're
If you
not.
leave it just to the teacher, this continuous assessment,
I think-
I'm afraid you will not get an accurate
Vivian,
result.
very
I just think
briefly.
that what we will have is a better reflection of their abilities and their progress over
All right.
time.
Overall, what we need is more of us speaking languages, I think, per se.
Absolutely.
Of
So
course
anything that
we
helps
do.
with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Which is why, of course, the government in 2004 made languages at Key Stage 4
Lovely.
voluntary.
Leave it there.
That was a good.
Thank you
good
very
idea.
much.
Will you come
Thank
and teach me, Simon?
I'd like you to.
I
right,
can-
But now,
I can still remember the questions, one or two questions from my German O-level oral in 1971.
It's always traumatic, but it's no more traumatic than actually when you're on the street trying to
Yes.
order your coffee or when you're broken
That's
down.
gracious.
Anyway, right.
I did mine exactly the same year. Extraordinary.
Maybe even at the same time. Thank you very much.
OK, we have to leave it there, unfortunately, but thank you both very much indeed. It's 7:42. Good morning to you.